How's the royal family? I pray that everyone is doing well. Well, my royal family, many know that Trump has shut down, they say partially. No, he didn't shut it down. And Trump did threaten that he would shut down this country if he don't get his way. And when y'all hear the details, I want y'all to pay close attention, because you see how long this video is. It's one of these popcorn videos that kick your heels back. But what I want y'all to do, my royal family, is listen very, very close and what is being said. So I'm going to play this first video. I'm going to break it down. Then I'm going to play the second video and close it out real sweet, like I always do.
East Coast. Our breaking news: the federal government now officially partially shut down. Congress was unable to reach an agreement with President Trump to temporarily fund the government, the president insisting that any deal would have to include $5 billion for a border wall. Here's what he said in the Oval Office last week.
Okay, you want to put that on my...
You said it.
I'll take it.
Okay, good.
You know what I'll say? Yes. If we don't get what we want, one way or the other, whether it's through you, through a military, through anything you want to call, I will shut down the government.
Okay,
absolutely.
fair enough.
And
We
I am
disagree.
proud, and I'll
We
tell you what,
disagree.
I am proud to shut down the government for border security, Chuck. I will take the mantle. I will be the one to shut it down. I'm not going to blame you for it.
He got his wish. The government, as of this moment, now partially shut down days before Christmas. Both the House and the Senate adjourned late Friday night, but will return on Saturday. I want to go right to CNN's Brian Stelter, Phil Mattingly, Caitlin Collins, and Elena Plott. Hello to all of you, I should say, excuse me. That sound that you hear, which is crickets in Washington, Phil, that's the government now shut down for the third time this year. How long are we expecting this one to go on?
I don't think anybody has the answer to that question. It's funny, Don, I was talking to a Republican official who's been a veteran of all of these over the course of not just this year, but the last couple of years, and he made what I thought was a rather salient point. Both parties have managed to bumble their way into shutdowns over the course of the last couple of years, but the reality is there's no elegant way out. There's no way that every party involved can claim a win, and the reality of the matter is somebody is essentially going to be bludgeoned and have to cry mercy. I think the big question right now going into this, and as we now are in a partial shutdown at this moment, is anybody willing to cry mercy? Most notably, is the president willing to blink? When you look at the dynamics as they've sat for really the last couple of weeks, the president wants $5 billion for his border wall. Negotiations tonight said that they were willing to come down a little bit from that. Democrats have made clear they're not budging off what their offers have been for the last number of days. And if nobody is willing to blink, then there is no resolution in the near future. Now, Don, you know as well as anybody, if Congress wants to make something work and the president is willing to sign, things can often come together rather quickly. The problem right now, when you talk to both Republicans and Democrats on Capitol Hill, is they believe one key ingredient of that equation does not exist: the president's willingness to sign anything less than what he's looking for, and therein lies the possibility that this isn't just an hours-long shutdown or a couple days-long shutdown, but one that might actually last weeks at a time.
Caitlin, did you get special dispensation to stay on the White House lawn? Because you're still, usually by 10:15, we're like, we got to get her off the lawn. The curfew is
just for you, Don.
So 10 days ago, Caitlin, President Trump told Democratic leaders that he'd proudly own this shutdown. Now he's blaming Democrats. Do we know what he would sign to reopen the government?
No, and no one will go as far as to say what exactly that is, and that's the frustration of many Senate Republicans, even those who visited the White House earlier today, such a last-minute meeting that some of them couldn't even get through Secret Service when they first arrived. That has been the million-dollar question here. What is the president going to support? Because earlier this week, we started out with House Speaker Paul Ryan and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell believing the president was going to sign that short-term spending bill, and they were feeling pretty confident about it, with Mitch McConnell telling reporters there was not going to be a shutdown. Of course, here we are at midnight, and we are now in a partial government shutdown. Now, so far tonight, night, the president sent his Vice President Mike Pence, his incoming Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney, and even his senior advisor and son-in-law Jared Kushner up to Capitol Hill for about 5 hours today, where Phil and everyone is chasing them around. And of course, they're working on these negotiations, talking about what they want, saying they want more than $1.6 billion for the border wall, but not going as far to say as they need $5 billion. But of course, they can negotiate all they want, and it all comes down to whether or not the president is going to support something, and that is what House Republicans will be watching over the next few days.
Brian, are we here because conservative hosts revolted, got under Trump's skin?
That's a big factor. Right-wing radio and TV hosts combined with the Freedom Caucus pressuring the president to fulfill a campaign promise. That campaign promise, of course, was rooted in misinformation. That promise that there had to be a wall because there's this invasion coming from the South, all of that's rooted in a lot of misinformation. But the president believed it, he promoted it, and here we are 2 years into his presidency, the third shutdown in less than a year. This is how the GOP is going to end 8 years of control of the House and Senate. You know, they control both chambers right now. This is how they're going to end it, by shutting the government down. It's a sad day, and I think no matter whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, I don't care about politics, the country deserves better than this.
Yeah.
Federal employees screwed over Christmas.
Yeah. Elena, was it a mistake for President Trump to say $5 billion for the wall, given the votes don't exist in the Senate? Did he play this wrong?
You know what, Don, I think one point that keeps coming back to me over and over, especially today as I've spoken to sources on the Hill and in the White House, is that Donald Trump had 2 opportunities earlier this year to accept a deal for $25 billion for funding for his border wall over the course of several years in exchange for a pathway to citizenship for DACA recipients. That is something that Republican leaders and Trump, turned their backs to both times. And Republicans on the Hill and especially in the Senate will tell you today that it was likely a big mistake on their part to not take this deal. And what I'm hearing, especially from people on the Trump campaign right now, is that coupled with just the larger idea that Trump will very likely not get the $5.7 billion he wants for this border wall. This puts him in a huge predicament ahead of 2020. How does he explain this to a base that is already, as Brian notes, unraveling in terms of their support for him?
But I'm wondering, do you think that deal, the one that they had, do you think that'll still be on the table once Democrats take over the House?
No, absolutely not. As Dick Durbin put it, I think to Bloomberg earlier today, that deal is off the table entirely. And Pelosi will say this to reporters as well. They don't trust the president anymore when it comes to negotiations over DACA. He's shown twice that while he's willing to signal that he wants to enter into good faith talks about ensuring a pathway to citizenship, he ultimately doesn't follow through. So they're not going to start down that road again.
Interesting. Phil Mattingly, what are your Republican sources telling you about the president and his shifting positions? Do they feel like they have any guidance here?
No, they don't. I think Caitlin hit on this, and it really underscores what's happened over the course, or what's transpired over the course of the last 3 days. Again, Senate Republicans had a deal. They passed something unanimously with Democratic support to fund the government through February 8th, with the understanding that they would continue this fight then when House Democrats took over the majority, and they were completely undercut. They wouldn't have made that deal, and they would not have put it on the Senate floor and voted on it if they did not think the president was going to support it in the end. That was their implicit, and I'm told explicit, understanding from their conversations with the White House. And there's something here that I think can't be overstated. It seems obvious, but it's a really crucial point. Given that Senate Republicans and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell feel completely undercut by what occurred earlier this week, and where House Republicans stand, especially heading into the minority, there is no separation between the president and where Republicans are right now. Republicans have told me repeatedly over the course of the last 24 hours, until the president tells us exactly what he wants, we are not willing to move something to the floor. They are not willing to undercut him. They are not willing to just go on faith or even go on the word of a vice president or an incoming chief of staff or a son-in-law. It will take the president to tell them what he wants in terms of a deal for them to move forward on anything, and that is to some degree caused a state of paralysis as these negotiations go on behind the scenes.
Let's talk more about that, Caitlin, because he mentioned the son-in-law and the Vice President Pence, even Mick Mulvaney, who has once said that the wall was simplistic. So there's Pence, there's Kushner, they're all working, Mulvaney, all working behind the scenes earlier on Capitol Hill. What is the White House's next move?
they're kind of sitting back and waiting and watching. Now, President Trump shelved his plans to go to Florida today, where he's supposed to be there for a little over 2 weeks or so, and he's still staying here at the White House. And White House officials have said so far they believe he'll stay until a vote happens. Now, right now they're hopeful something could come together. Of course, they've got to give them 24 hours notice to get back to Washington to vote when they do feel that they have an agreement. So they don't think anything will happen until Sunday or so, but they're waiting to see what's going to happen. And as Phil says, they don't believe they're any closer to a deal right now, so they're kind of just sitting back waiting to see what it is that's going to happen next, because they do very well feel that a shutdown could go on for several days. Now, they feel confident that if it only happens for a few days, they can master that messaging. They can say, this is the president fighting for the border wall, that's why the government is shut down. And they've also got a few days to buy themselves some time, because it's over the weekend, not as many people are at work over the weekend, so you don't see people who have to sit at home that typically would be going into the office. However, if this starts to stretch out into several days, several weeks, going long after the holidays, that's going to be a problem for them, because they know that by the minute they are losing leverage, because those newly empowered House Democrats are going to take over, and things are going to be very different for them. So they're well aware of that, and of course they're waiting to see what the president is going to say. They sent Pence, Kushner, and Mulvaney up to the Hill today. They came back, they discussed what their conversations were with Schumer, with Ryan, with everyone they spoke with President Trump before leaving tonight, and now it's essentially waiting to see where they go from here.
Yeah.
All right, my royal family. So, before we get into the next video, now you clearly heard there was a $25 billion deal laid on the table. Now, some people voted for Trump because they said he's the ultimate deal maker. Poor choices. So, what I would continue to throw up in his face, in his cronies' faces, is y'all had two opportunities. We gave you two opportunities. So they don't have no leverage. They don't have no leverage because you rejected $25 billion. And now you're demanding $5 billion on the spot. Also, that I remember distinctly, Schumer said that $1 billion has already been put in place, and only 6% of the billion has been used. So y'all ain't even doing what y'all supposed to be doing, Trump. And we are not fooled by this shit. This is nothing more than a distraction, because they is heavy on his ass, because Mullen is doing what Mullen does best, investigating Trump, and everything is landing on his lap, so he is bringing more attention to himself. You don't know what the fuck he's doing. He's all up in his emotions because of his personal shit. So let's continue on, my royal family, and see what Pelosi and Schumer has to say.
Speaking right now, let's go to them.
And I don't know what the answer to the question is. The President of the United States prefers to shut government down and will resist any opportunity to keep government open. Again, we are completely ready, as we have been for a while, with bipartisan, bicameral legislation to pass the 6th appropriations bill and have a continuing resolution for the 7th bill if we cannot come to terms on that. We've offered that to the President. We've also offered him one continuing resolution with 7 bills in it. Yesterday, the United States Senate passed legislation overwhelmingly, and I'll yield to the distinguished leader in the Senate to talk about that. The President is doing everything that he can to shut the government down. Have to ask the question, why? Does he not believe in governance? Does he not care about the American people? Doesn't he know that the economy is uncertain? Hasn't he followed the stock market that he likes to brag about sometimes? There's something wrong with this picture, especially in the holiday season. And so, if they make the bill bad enough, they're able to get maybe enough votes on the House side for a shameful bill that is unworthy of this House of Representatives and certainly of the American people. that, I yield to the distinguished leader from the Senate, Mr.
Well, thank you, Leader Pelosi. Now, today's events have made one thing clear. President Trump is plunging the country into chaos. The stock market's down another 500 points. General Mattis is stepping down, and we know he has real disagreements with the president on Syria and on the wall. And now, President Trump is throwing a temper tantrum and creating the Trump shutdown of the government. Last night, the Senate passed by voice, unanimously, a bill proposed by Leader McConnell. All Speaker Ryan has to do is put it on the floor of the House. It'll get a majority of votes, and the president can sign it and avoid a shutdown. But unfortunately, President Trump was attacked this morning and last night by the hard right, and fearful, he backed off his commitment to sign this bill. Republican leaders told us yesterday that he was ready to sign the bipartisan bill that passed the Senate unanimously, every Democrat and every Republican, to avoid a government shutdown. The bill contained neither Democratic demands or Republican demands. It said to the American people, we have a way to keep the government open. And Leader Pelosi, Leader McConnell, and myself have done everything we can to avoid a shutdown. But President Trump wants one. He's asked for one 25 times, and he said in front of us he'd be proud to shut down the government. It is nothing to be proud of. The bottom line is simple. The Trump temper tantrum will shut down the government, but it will not get him his wall. The bill that's on the floor of the House, everyone knows will not pass the Senate. Speaker Ryan, Leader McCarthy have cynically put it on the floor of the House, knowing it can't pass the Senate. Everyone knows it can't pass the Senate. It's a cynical attempt to just hurt innocent people and do just what President Trump wants, even though they probably know it's bad for the country. So, bottom line is very simple. There's still hope. Leader Pelosi and I have put 2 proposals on the table. We have not taken them off. That would avoid a government shutdown and get a majority of votes in the House and Senate. Leader McConnell had put on the floor last night a proposal that would avoid shutting down the government. It is a shame that this president, who is plunging the nation into chaos, is throwing another temper tantrum and going to hurt lots of innocent people. The Trump temper tantrum may produce a government shutdown. It will not get him his wall.
Mr. Leader, what happens next in the Senate if this bill does pass the House tonight? What is McConnell talking about?
Leader McConnell has said he would schedule a vote. It clearly will not come close to getting the 60 votes that it needs. And then Leader Pelosi and I, and probably Senator McConnell, would hope that the House would then consider passing the bipartisan, unanimously passed bill that the Senate would pass. But whether they'll do that or not, your guess is as good as mine. Donald Trump wants a shutdown, and they seem to be so afraid that they're going to go along. We'll see.
Pelosi, a couple minutes when you told some of us that you were shaken by the news about James Mattis's resignation. Why are you shaken by this news?
Well, I'm shaken by the news because of the patriot that General Secretary Mattis is. I think that everybody in the country should read his letter of resignation. It's a letter of great patriotism, great respect for the president, but also a statement of his values, where he talks about the strength of our nation is intrinsically linked to the strength of unique and comprehensive system of alliances that we have. That he talks about that we must be resolute and unambiguous in our approach to those countries whose strategic interests are increasingly in tension with tensions with ours. The list, it's a beautiful letter about, again, our values as a nation in terms of our national security. written by a patriotic American who was a comfort to many of us as a voice of stability in the Trump administration. So just look at this week. The president taking troops out of Syria without really full consultation with the national security leaders of his own administration. The president taking actions that encouraged his Secretary of Defense to issue a letter of resignation. He's reversing his position about signing a bill. Maybe he thinks if government shut down, he can golf more comfortably. That's not how it works. Government must work, even if you're golfing for 2 weeks. So there's something very wrong with this picture. And this resignation is one, we just were briefed a week ago by Secretary Mattis and Secretary Pompeo, and that was last Thursday, so it was 1 week ago. Our troops look to Secretary Mattis as a leader, and now he is going to be leaving them. This is very serious for our country. I yield.
Yeah. Secretary Mattis was one of the few symbols, the few items of strength and stability in this administration. Everything that indicates stability, everything that indicates strength, everything that indicates knowledge is leaving this administration. General Kelly, General Mattis, so many others. McMaster, exactly. There is chaos now in this administration. This week was one of the most chaotic weeks we've ever seen in American government. And amazingly, they want to close the week, President Trump does, by shutting down the government. Shutting down the government. Now, we all know that Secretary Mattis had real disagreements with the president on Syria and on the wall. Some have speculated that the president was going to demand that he start building a wall, which he knows he can't do by law, and maybe that's one of the reasons he stepped down.
Leaders, do you think there's any reasonable prospect that if there is a shutdown, you could override President Trump's veto of a CR in the next week or so?
You'd have to ask our Republican friends.
It's strange about how our Republican friends, the worse he gets, the more they rally round him. And this, just to refer back to what Leader Schumer has saying about the voice of stability in this administration and the people who have left. You have leaders, great leaders, who have left the administration in dismay, and the rest of them have left in disgrace. And that's what this administration has been about. We don't want to be fear-mongers in terms of our country. This great country can withstand just about anything, but it shouldn't have to. It shouldn't have to. Yes, I am shaken by the resignation of General Mattis for what it means to our country, for the message it sends to our troops, and for the indication of what his view is of the Commander-in-Chief.
Are Americans less safe without Mattis running the Pentagon? Should they be fearful?
Look, our military soldiers, the 2.15 million of them, our civilian employees in defense looked up to General Mattis. I'm sure they feel it's a great loss. I'm sure most Americans feel it's a great loss. And everything like this that happens, a resignation of a strong leader, gives the American people less and less faith in President Trump and the way he governs.
It's just all the more reason for us to pray for our country. Our country has been blessed in so many ways by leaders throughout the centuries, the decades, and some of them, one of them, General Mattis. This is a very sad day for our country. Read his letter. Have you read his letter? Read his letter.
All right, my royal family. So, we are watching Babylon fall before our eyes, and this was prophesied in the good book. There are people that argue and say that the good book is a total lie, but we cannot deny what we are seeing unfolding in real time. So Trump is doing everything according to the good book. And there is no leadership. We're nothing more than dealing with a criminal that said, make America great again. In his personal shit, and his little dusty ass, gangster ass kids stealing and robbing. And remember this, my royal family. His children and his son-in-law and his wife and people that are really close to him, that's been with him for many years, they have the same mindset. They may not display the stupidity that he displayed, but remember, they have the same mindset. They are just as much of an idiot as he is. So I wonder, the people that are staunch supporters of Trump, how they're going to wiggle their way out of this, how they're going to spin this in their head, what lie or whatever people do when they see highly dysfunctional shit. Like I said, I don't care who it is. I don't care how close I am to the person. If it's dysfunctional, it's dysfunctional. And I often say, wherever it lands, it lands. And sometimes it don't land where I want it to land. But it is what it is. So a lot of us are quite savvy. We know what we are seeing in America. And so we have to realize that other countries are looking at America, and America has no leadership. She is falling before our eyes. You know, I would read about these things in history, but to actually be a part of history, actually to see Babylon fall, that we are living through history. Remember what I said, my royal family. Everything that we would see would be in biblical proportions. So, my royal family, render your voice with your beautiful divine words. And as always, my royal family, I thank you for your love. I thank you for your support. And with that said, Ashe.